I'm so excited to be here. My name is Franco Garcia, the U.S. Shadow Representative. Let me just tell you that we're doing wonderful in terms of statehood. Over 174 co-sponsors in the House, almost 30 in the Senate, the most we've ever had. I just completed a journey to Europe where we were able to promote statehood there. We actually had a member of parliament in the UK who actually made headlines in DC for calling out the US for not giving representation to 700,000 people. Thank you so much and have a wonderful forum.
The question that is before the candidates, each one, and you have less than 3 minutes to make a response. You have heard and you already are knowledgeable about the paid family leave bill. We want to know from you, did you vote if you are currently a member of the council? Did you vote for paid family leave? What is your idea of its importance to the women's issues? And then finally, if legislation is introduced to modify or to postpone the family leave implementation, how will you address that issue? Are we clear? Now, the format that we use, we start with one person one time, and we start with another person another time, okay? And so that is, so according to our format, we are honored to have the Honorable Anita Bonds to begin our discussion. You may take a moment if you want to tell anything you want to say about yourself, but all of us are probably familiar with the background of our candidates, so you can use your 3 minutes in any way you have. We have the timekeeper here, and he will, it's on the computer, and the bell will ring as you start. Thank you so much, Honorable.
All right, and thank you very much, Ms. Shelton.
Would you
dear
like
friend.
to share the mic?
Can you hear me in the back?
Please use the mic. Please use the mic.
Okay. All right. I was so hoping that when we were informed that this would be an opportunity for us in a very relaxed environment to have a discussion that we were going to do that. But we'll use the mic and pass it along. It's a pleasure to be here with you, and I am going to treat this opportunity as a discussion. And I want to thank this organization for making me your Democratic nominee. That's number one. On my literature, I was endorsed by this organization, and I respect its principles and its goals. And I want everyone, some are new, because I've been to all of the forums. Some of you are new. I am delighted that this is an organization that's growing and is so needed in the District of Columbia. So thank you very much. This is a very important subject. In fact, it looks to me like the 3 or 4 items that are on the agenda are all very important, because the District of Columbia is changing by leaps and bounds. And so, you know, it's important for my sleepy little southern town, as I've called it over my years of being involved, that we become as progressive as we can on behalf of the people of the community. And so to that end, I'm very excited that we were able to make this law. It is a complicated law. It is a law that does not just benefit residents that live in the District of Columbia. It benefits people who come every day to the District of Columbia and make it their work home, so to speak. Now, some say, why are we doing this? We're doing this in the same spirit that we many years ago decided that, and this was by referendum, that if you came to Washington, D.C., we would provide you with shelter, we would provide you with food, and If you remember those days, we have an ordinance on the books that says that's who we are, the District of Columbia. And so in that spirit, that is how I interpret the will of the people as it relates to this particular decision about paid leave. It will be a little complicated. The discussions will go on for a long time yet. And as Jennifer mentioned, we certainly hope that all of the continuous discussions about it have subsided, and so that it will actually be implemented. And yes, I am one of those persons who actually voted for it. In the event that there is an opportunity to look at it anew, I'm sure I will give it as much attention as I possibly can. Thank you.
All right, thank you. Yes, Ms. Rita.
Goes to me, okay.
Yes.
First, thank you all for allowing me to be among some great women in this room. I appreciate men too, but this is women in politics, so I do appreciate this opportunity. I am Dion Reader, and again, I apologize for my lateness, but I do want to just talk a little bit about it. So I wanted to go on record that I am, and have always been, in support of paid leave. One of the things I think that is not clear here is how the law is actually being enacted. Those are some of the questions that I do have. Those are some of the issues that I do have. So I didn't get a chance to vote on it because you all have not elected me yet. So that's not an issue for me. Would I modify the legislation? So I would like for us to take a minute, because I have 3, or probably 2 now, to look at how modification will be important for those of us who are in this city. I believe that our DC City Council has a responsibility in focusing all of its attention on DC residents. That should be your first priority. Any legislation that we have currently on our books that focuses our attention on 65% of those individuals who do not get a chance to vote for me is problematic. I believe in paid family leave. I understand the importance of it. I recently buried one of my own employees because her parents did not have health insurance, a 25-year-old young lady who struggled with kidney disease. She died on September the 14th. We buried her on September the 30th. And the reason why I'm saying we buried her is because that's exactly what happened. I am not one of the business owners who believe that I need the District of Columbia government to tell me how to be human to my residents. That's not important for me. But if my restaurant did not exist, and if, quite frankly, if we do this the way that it's now legislated, many of us, small business communities, will not be able to be an anchor in this city. And you're saying, well, Dion, it's not a lot of money, but compacted with so many other things that we're now responsible for dealing with. And when you don't know the industry, you really do not understand that restaurant margins are very thin. I am operating a restaurant in a community where it's very low to no disposable income. So for me to have to pay an additional fee for individuals who are not DC residents is problematic. So would I modify it? Yes. Do I want it? Yes. But I want to figure out a way that the priority first goes to DC residents. And 65% of our money do not leave the District of Columbia, because I do not believe Maryland, Virginia, nor Pennsylvania would do the same for us. So I believe in paid leave, but I want us to look at how the legislation can be modified to support DC residents first. Thank you.
Great. Good afternoon, DC Women in Politics and men. And the men. So I'm Alyssa Silverman.
Charter member.
Oh, John Zatoli?
You.
Oh, yes, I am a charter member. That is correct. Probably Zatoli too. So I'm Alyssa Silverman. I'm here to ask for you to re-elect me to the council. I'm one of the independents on the council. So not only did I vote for it, Anita, I am the co-author of the bill. And I actually think that paid family leave, especially for women, is going to be so beneficial and for women-owned businesses too. And because there's a reason why paid family leave, and I want to thank Jennifer for the great thorough explanation she gave. There's a reason why states around the country are doing paid family leave. There's a reason why businesses that have lots of women in their workforce, like Hilton Hotels, is giving women 10 weeks of paid family leave, including their housekeeping. That includes everyone who works for the hotel, especially their housekeeping force, which is largely women, because it keeps women in the workplace. It allows women to take care of their families. And no offense to the men in here, but we know women bear the burden, not only of caring for the younger generation, but caring for the older generation. And I have to tell you, some of the most heartbreaking stories we heard from district residents was about adult children who, in the end stages of a mom or dad's life, just couldn't afford to take a day off to say goodbye. To say goodbye to the mom and dad that brought them up. It's heartbreaking. But let me address the issues that have come up. So this is an employer-based benefit, as Jennifer said, and we have other employer-based benefits: workers' compensation, unemployment insurance, the minimum wage. I'll just say to this crowd, do we have a different, so we pay the workers' compensation for people who live in Virginia and work in the district, for people who live in Maryland and work in the district. We don't have a minimum wage for district residents and then a minimum wage for Virginia residents or a minimum wage for Maryland residents. It's an employer-based benefit. It works the same way. Then let me talk about so saying that we can only do it for DC residents, we can't do that. We just can't. So saying you want to do it, that would be great, but you can't do it legally that way. So I just want to address that. Let me address the other issue, which is the employer pays the 0.62% contribution. So it's true, in some states there is the employee pays part of it and the employer pays part of it. And I'd love to do that too. There's one tremendous problem that Franklin knows about: statehood. Congress handcuffs us in terms of we can't tax Maryland and Virginia residents who work in the district and live, we can't tax their income. It is in our home rule charter specifically that if we took the income of Maryland and Virginia residents and used it for paid family leave, it would be considered a tax. And that is prohibited by our home rule charter. So for the folks who say that they want to do that, then we need statehood. I mean, I agree that I think we all agree we need statehood, don't we?
Yes, we do.
And I'll just say one more thing, is that if you're not for this paid family leave program, we had a 2-year debate, as Jennifer said, plus another year actually, where we considered other options. But what we realized is there's no other way to do it given our statehood dilemma. So if you're not for this, you're not for paid family leave in the District of Columbia. It's a smokescreen to say that you are for paid family leave, but you're not for this version, because we've had 3 years to try to find another version. And I'll just say one more thing, actually. I commend Dion. She came to our paid family leave implementation hearing. As some of you know, I'm the labor chair. So I'm in charge of doing the oversight of the implementation of paid family leave, and Dion testified and told me what her payroll was. And actually, Dion told a story about how she is a good employer, and she does care for her employees, and she paid out of pocket for the paid family leave. And when we did the math, it actually would be less expensive, given her payroll, to be part of the insurance system than to pay that salary out of pocket. And that's why small businesses especially like paid family leave, because if they are a good-hearted employer, they're paying that person's salary completely out of pocket instead of spreading the risk, which is what an insurance system does, which allows you to save money. So I think this is, to get back to your question, Anita, going to be a tremendous benefit for women and men in the city. I also think it's going to be a benefit for our businesses, and it's going to make us a more competitive city.
All right. Normally we would have a crosstalk, but we are privileged to have the mayor of the District of Columbia present in our audience. Mayor Bowser? Right. Did you have any comments about the budget or issues of crime? Or any particular issue that you would like to discuss with the group of women's issues?
Well, I just think all women should go out and vote on November the 6th. Women and men, go out and vote on November the 6th, but I don't want to interrupt the forum.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
All right. Cross questions. Number 5. Who has number 5 here? On their ballot, on their form. Who has number 5? I have 5 because number 6. No 5? Okay. Okay. Do you have a question on paid family leave? You can decline or
I can decline.
Okay. Number 11. Number 11, who has number 11? Who is number 11? Number 11, do you have a question on paid family leave?
I just feel like it's, I just feel like it is so needed because, like, I'm a parent myself, and for my children have to take care of me, issue in their work. So, you have to put yourself into that thought that it could happen to you, and you need to know that you will be taken care of through, your children's got your companies or whatever. But it's heartening to know that we need that.
Okay. Number 18. Any questions? All right, hearing none, we will move on to the next point. The next question has to do with Initiative 77. Woo, woo, woo. Initiative 77. Wow. I don't even know whether we're going to let the candidates give us an explanation. Thank you. We're going to let the candidates explain. As you know, it is a very controversial piece of legislation. We in DC Women in Politics views it as deep concern since many of the people who are in the industry are women. And so that is one of the what we call bread and butter issues. You are also aware that recently our city council, after the voters had made a decision on Initiative 77, has decided to, what would you say, appeal it or modify it?
Overturn.
Or whatever.
Overturn.
Okay, so it is fact. We are going to focus on several aspects of it, but particularly we're going to ask the candidates. One, if you are currently on the city council, did you vote to appeal the Initiative 70?
Repeal.
Yeah, repeal. Thank you very much. Repeal. And if you did, why? And if you didn't, why not? And if you elected, what would you do if you were on the city council at the time? And so therefore, we want you to address the issue. The merits of the bill is very complicated, but we're now dealing with the aspects of it. Okay, we will go in the order that we have here. We began with the first time with Ms. Barnes, and this time Ms. Rita. Right, and Ms. Rita is a new member of DC Women in Politics. All right.
Thank you so very much. Well, thank you. So I'm not on the city council, not yet. So I didn't have the, yes. I didn't have the benefit of voting either way. I believe that initiatives, I was not in support of Initiative 77, and let me state my case, I was not. And the reason, again, I was not in support because I am a restaurateur. I actually already followed the law. The law states that I have to pay my restaurant employees, who are tip wage employees, the minimum wage, regardless of what they make in tips. I was following that law before anyone asked me to move everyone up to $15 an hour. That was already going to happen to all of our employees. So we pay above $13.50, and we always have. As a matter of fact, when we do the math, I have one tipped employee. We have a small restaurant, you guys. So you order your food, you get a wonderful buzzer, you come back and you get it. So we don't have wait staff. But our bartenders, we actually pay them well over $15 an hour. The reason why we've always done that is because we wanted to retain good customer service in the industry. Every one of my managers, including my wife, is a bartender. So we are already prepared for anything to come. And I'm stating that to say, when I talk to my employees regarding Initiative 77, they did not want us to support it. And I believe we have to do a better job in this. I'm gonna stand up because I feel like I can't see everybody. Thank you. And I believe we must do a better job in our city when we're making decisions about the individuals that will be most affected by any legislation, talking to those individuals. I know no one talked to us. There are people that are saying that they did, but no one came east of the river.
That's right.
And no one came inside the 3 restaurants that we have in Ward 8. 3. Now, I don't know if they came up here. I live in Columbia Heights. You can walk to 10. The 3 restaurants in Ward 8, I didn't talk to anyone. I asked my staff, did you all talk to anyone? We have to do a better job in informing the individuals who are going to be most affected by legislation. You have individuals who make much more than $15 an hour. And those individuals would have impacted negatively with a $15 an hour decrease. So we have a misnomer that women are, and we say this, we're mistreated. Well, we are not only a woman-owned business, but the majority of the people that work in my restaurant are women. We are also, and this is clear, a lesbian-owned restaurant. My wife is here. I've been discriminated against more than anybody probably in this room. And quite frankly, I am not going to do anything that would kick my employees out from having a job. So I asked them what's best for them. So no, I was not in support of 77 because I talked to the industry employees and asked them what was best for them. If I was on the city council, what I have done, I am not in support of a repeal, never. I decided, because I know that we're going to talk about that, I decided that it was best for us to look at this law and pull it back, yes. And I do never want to go against the will of the voter, but you will hurt an industry of people that's the soul of our communities and our cities, and more people would have been unemployed, and that's my stance.
Okay. So I did not vote for repeal. And I did discuss this issue with restaurants, including the IHOP owners, because they had a tax abatement issue that came before the council as well. And so we lumped in an Initiative 77 conversation when they came to talk with my staff, just to be clear. Let me give you the reason what I did, which is I thought that we needed to uphold the will of the voters. The voters voted for Initiative 77, and I felt it was important to listen to voter voices, especially as we talked about before, given the statehood issue. I will say, though, that I did talk to restaurant owners around the city. And what I heard is that the labor costs would be burdensome. And I took that very seriously. So what I did was, in the end, craft a compromise, working with my colleagues and working actually with the restaurants to address their concerns. And here's what we came up with. To the servers and bartenders who you loudly heard from, saying that they didn't want Initiative 77, the compromise held them harmless. They were not going to be impacted by Initiative 77. But I can tell you as labor chair, where wage theft occurs. So we have a lot of people, the restaurants are a very important industry in our city. They are kind of the auto industry of DC. And it's very important we keep a vibrant hospitality industry here. But there are some people who work in that industry who don't get paid fairly. And I can tell you and what I realized from talking to restaurant owners and workers, tip workers, is a lot of the folks who don't get paid their correct wage are not the servers, but they're the what I would call indirectly tipped workers. When you go to a restaurant, you're paying your tip, which pays the salary of the server. It's also paying for bussers and food runners and bar backs. And I can tell you that there's no universal way to distribute those tips. And a lot of the folks who are in those jobs are people who aren't going to complain if they don't get the correct amount of money, either because they're immigrants or they just don't feel like they have the ability to complain. And I think our role as a government is to make sure we protect those workers, make sure they get a fair day's pay for a fair day's work. Because it doesn't even, even if you, let's say, are an undocumented worker, you still have a right to get paid fairly in this country. So what the compromise was, we held servers and bartenders harmless, and for the tip workers who were indirectly tipped, and for people like the man who testified, who works as a car valet, parking valet at the JW Marriott right across the street from the Wilson Building, that man makes $7 an hour. And what he told us is, people think I'm a salaried employee, so they don't tip when they leave their car for me to park. So for Mr. King, who's a Ward 7 resident, and for the bussers in this city, we would have given them a raise. And so I feel it would have upheld the will of the voter, and it also would have helped those who need the help the most. Let me say one thing, is that the other observation is that a lot of the good owners, I think like Dion, do pay their bartenders and their indirectly tipped workers more money than the tip minimum wage, for those who don't know, is $3.89. And the reason why I thought my compromise would be very reasonable is that we had been told by the good employers that they pay their bussers $8, $10 an hour because they know that the tip credit, kind of that difference between the tip wage and the minimum wage, they can't make just through tips, if that makes sense. So they pay them a higher wage, so the impact economically on restaurants wouldn't be that burdensome under our compromise plan. Let me say the big issues we want to address are wage theft, people not getting paid correctly for a fair day's work, and sexual harassment, which I think we have to mention in a group of women. So a lot of tipped employees feel like they have to take it. They have to take harassment because their money depends on it. So our compromise also addresses sexual harassment as well.
Okay. All right. Can you do it this way? All right, thank you very much. I was waiting for that
Also a member.
sound.
Also a member of DC Women in Politics.
Thank you very much. I rise because this is such an important issue. It's on the tip of everyone's tongue, and there are two matters that we want us to discuss. Whether or not we or any of us went against the will of the people, and then secondly, how does this Initiative 77 really affect the employees that we continue to think of as being the preponderance of tip workers who are restaurant employees. And so, yes, I voted for the alternative. My colleague here has indicated that she voted for the compromise. Well, where I come from, that means that every council member voted against the will of the people. And let me explain. If you vote for a compromise or you vote for an alternative, you did not uphold the document as was voted by everyone who came out in the primary. Okay, now let's be real about this. Now, why did we feel that way? Why did we do that? We did that because of some of what my colleagues have said here, that it was about the economy of the District of Columbia. It's about what is it that we have that we can present to community and say in earnest that this is how we make our living in the District of Columbia. There was a time when the federal government was the largest employer of local DC residents. It's not so much so now, as you well know. And that's why Metro is so important, because it takes people out, brings them back, takes them out, brings them back. It was never designed for us. And as it relates to this initiative 77, it was put on the ballot as a test. You and I, who've been here for years, know that we are constantly the test ground for any proposal that they're trying to move forward nationwide. Some of you remember the bottle bill. You remember a few other things, like when we voted for the maximum sentence, okay? In all of those cases, sometimes your elected leadership has to go a little deeper. And so we believe, all of the council members, all 13 of us, we had to go a little deeper. So we went either compromise, as Ms. Silverman refers to it, or alternative, which is what I voted for. And I voted for the alternative, which contains many of, I think, the important ingredients, and that is, it does say loud and clear that tip workers can continue to earn their tip. Many of the testifiers that Chairman Mendelson and Councilwoman Silverman was there for a while, that we heard up until 3:45 a.m. in the morning, 157 testimonies were very, very clear in support of not having to respond to the initiative. And so that's what we did. And we did it because it's about our economy. I don't want to be crazy, but remember back in the Clinton days, and there was this pundit that said, it's the economy, silly. It is the economy in the District of Columbia. And it is how we fuel so much of what we do for everyone across the board.
Okay, thank you. Yes, ma'am. Would you like, you have indicated that you would not have voted against the will of the people, even though, you know. I'm talking to candidate Reader, and she had indicated about the question about the will of the people. Would you like to ask the two people who are on the dais here how any questions about their vote?
That's loaded, isn't it? Actually, I think I've been very clear on both Councilmember Silverman's and Councilmember Bond's position on Initiative 77. The only thing I would add to that discussion is I believe in this city referendums should be placed on the general ballot. We both are independents, and some of us knew that you could vote, and some people did not. And I think that for me, and I'm sure my colleagues will agree, in the future, that level of education needs to go further through all of the citizens, and I think we would have saw something a little differently. So nothing directly, because I think we both are clear on both of their positions. Unless there's something they want to add.
I would like to.
Would you like to ask a question of Silverman or Reed?
No, I just wanted to.
Okay. Miss Silverman.
Anita, you have a comment?
No, the question now. First, we will get to you. would you like to ask a question of either two of these council members regarding the initiative?
I think we've covered it.
All right, right. Proceed. 1 minute?
Oh,
Yes.
so I do get, okay.
Yeah, you do get it.
Okay, all right. Well, a point that I wanted to add is when we talk about initiatives going on our ballot, we know that the process is designed for the Board of Elections to make a determination, and they are independent of the so-called politics, the elected officials process. I think that we have reached a point where it would be very wise for any proposed initiative to at least be aired in the public before it is actually placed on the ballot. That's what I think would be very helpful, because believe me, so many people called me after going. I wanted to wait until about 7:30 before I leave the office or my home and vote, okay? And I like to vote on election day. And I was sitting in the office, and 3:30, 4 o'clock, 5:30, even as early as 11:30, someone called to ask me about, Anita, this is what I voted for. Clarify what I voted for. And I'm not trying to be choppy here. I'm just simply saying that was the first time. And I've been a voter. Linda knows I've been a voter in this city for eons. I'll just leave it at that. And that was the first time I'd ever gotten questions about, what is it that I thought I did? And you want to make sure that all workers have minimum wage. And that is the law of the land, the law of DC now. And so there was some confusion. Whether we want to admit it or accept it or not, there was confusion. So thank you.
Okay. Number 17. Number 17.
It's just around.
Number 17. Do you have a question?
Yeah, I'll ask a question. I want to ask all three of you.
Did she need the mic? No.
I don't need. Do I need the mic?
No.
Okay. Moving forward, obviously this question of wage theft is the foundation of all of our concerns for all folks who don't have a voice. So what are you going to look at moving forward with respect to enforcement, to make sure this is enforced to protect all people with whatever we have?
Okay. We will spontaneously 1 minute, less than 1 minute.
Very quickly, one of the provisions in the alternative is a process where the payrolls of restaurants will be done by a third party. And the third party will be checking and making sure that the minimum wage is paid. So I think that helps a lot. Also, the issue of wage theft is usually one where individuals, if they're brave enough, and they're not going to worry about whether or not they will have work, the next day, they can file a claim. But we now are proposing a hotline, anonymous hotline, so that we can do something. And there are other things that I believe that will come into play as we move forward. And also, we want to take a closer look at those individuals like barbers, beauticians. They're going to resist. You and I know your beautician's going to resist. But others that are not really paid at the minimum wage, but live primarily off of their tips. The problem is that the federal government says that you're a tip worker if you make $30 a month in tips. That must have been from 1910. Okay, but that's the application. And so the District of Columbia, we have to do better, and we have to look at things a little better. And I think that's what this whole initiative has brought to the attention of the elected officials. We know that we need to help where there is a great need for help. Individuals making $7 an hour, and maybe they might get another $7 or $10 that day for tips, is not the going rate when a wait staff will make as much as $50, $60 almost in an hour in some instances in tip. Thank you.
Would you like any comment?
The wage theft question? Should Deanna go next? Or?
You can go in.
Okay. Well, thanks, Shelley, for the question. As I mentioned, I'm chair of the Labor Committee, and I've been very focused on enforcement. I don't think enforcement is everything. Let me tell you about what we've done to strengthen enforcement. So my committee, in this past year's budget, because now we're in next year, paid for 2 attorneys at the Office of the Attorney General. Attorney General Racine said to me, I'd love to enforce wage theft, but I just don't have the manpower, or woman power, we should say, in this group, to do it. And I said, okay, I'm going to pay for 2 attorneys so you can do it. And in fact, Attorney General Racine brought forth a case you might have read about in the newspaper, on the radio. It is probably the biggest wage theft case. 500 people impacted. These are 500 people who didn't get paid fairly. That's not me, right? Didn't get their paid sick time, didn't get overtime. People who live in our city, and Attorney General Racine is prosecuting that company. Now, that company is an electrical company, not a restaurant. As I said, we know that there are really good employers in the hospitality industry, and there are bad employers. There are people who are not paying their folks well. And I just want to make the point that the reason why we were going to increase the base wage is because, as I said, it's often the people who are indirectly tipped in restaurants who aren't receiving their pay. They're not getting those tips that they should get. So when you increase their base pay, the amount of pay that's going to be in their check, it ensures they're at least going to get more money, as much of the money that they should have as possible. I just want to say one thing is that in terms of how the repeal process went, we voted on a repeal. And 5 of us came forward with a compromise, and we included these provisions of wage theft to strengthen wage theft and and prevent sexual harassment, which the chairman took. So I was really thrilled that we lost on the repeal. We repealed the bill. To be very clear, we repealed 77, but there were some provisions that were put in the repeal bill that will help a little bit.
Thank you. I think it's important that we look at the industry as well, and we also make sure that our industry owners are educated. It's a travesty anywhere when you steal people's money. One of the things that we have in our restaurant is that it's full disclosure. Our employees can see how much money they've made on a daily basis in tips. They see what they actually put in, and they see what they get on a return. In addition to that, on a weekly basis, they check in with the manager on duty to see actually what their payroll will look like on payroll day. This is a routine that we have since we started. Full disclosure and oversight, but education on both sides is so important. We have to make sure that we do have a business industry in our city so we can employ individuals who live in DC. Yes. But we also have to make sure that we have good businesses, and they're doing right by the DC residents. So I do agree, oversight is important, but education is important too. So businesses should know when you come to DC, you have to treat our people right, and you have to first understand that legally, we're not gonna allow you to steal from our DC residents. So I believe in transparency, and I also believe in oversight. And I don't know how people get away with it, because my staff would never allow that from me. We couldn't do it there. So that's my answer. I think we have to have full transparency and education on the side of the business owner as well as our DC residents. Thank you.
Candidates, this is the rough one. We are now talking about the displacement of properties that have had 4 and 5 bedrooms and redeveloping them, even though there were conditions that were strong. We are also talking about some of us senior citizens who live in neighborhoods, and we are being priced out, forced out. We are talking about seniors who we're very pleased that some are able to stay. but we are also concerned. And moving into those places have been young with families who can afford to pay $1.5 million for a house. And while they have come to the District of Columbia, not to displace us, but to find a capital area so that they are here. Some of them have selected neighborhoods because they have been diverse and want to work together with us. But the repercussions is that we are being moved out, Barry Farms, right, Brooklyn Manor, up the street, around the corner. We have elected and will elect council members who are keenly aware of this issue. We want to know from you, if elected, what will you specifically do about the question of reorganization of our communities? What have you done? And what will you do? And what do you think should be done?
Say it again.
Is that clear enough for the audience? And we don't want any random double talk now.
That's right.
We don't want numbers. We don't want legislation number 24. We don't want budget number something. Tell us.
Where we gonna live?
We need you. This is very important to our community. Okay. And we are going to, we usually give you 2 minutes, 3 minutes. We're going to give you all of your 3 minutes. But at some time you do double talk, the chair is going to ring the bell. All right? And if you think they're doing double talk, raise your hand and I'll ring the bell for you. Okay. All right. We're moving along. We want to make sure that you, in this poll, remember that you have two votes. This is a very critical issue. In the order, now remember 2 votes at the end, but this is a critical one. Okay, according to the lineup, how are you're supposed to proceed with beginning with Alyssa Silverman. May I have the bell in case somebody starts doing double talk? I'm gonna ring the bell. I want concrete answers to specific questions. All right. All right.
So, Mrs. Johnson, as you said, I got involved in Brookland Manor. I'll speak really specifically about Brookland Manor. Ms. Elliott had written me before I even got to the council. I still have your letter. What is happening in Brookland Manor should not happen in our city at all. People who have lived for a long time in our city should be able to stay there, and the council should support you in doing that. I will tell you specifically what I did. And Brookland Manor actually turned out to be very personal for my office because we hired an intern in our office who won an essay contest. It was a high school essay contest about civic participation. And his essay was on exactly what you feel like, Ms. Johnson, that he felt he lived in Brookland Manor and he felt that the neighborhood he had called home wasn't for him anymore. Well, I hired him. And let me tell you, I sat down with Mid-City. When I sat down with Mid-City management, who are the people who are developing Brookland Manor, he was in the room. And when they started doing their double talk, so maybe ring the bell for that, Anita, he was able to say to them, I live there. That's not what's going on. They were saying how great the community was, how they had cleaned it up, and he said, you know what, Councilmember Silverman drives me home. So, you know, and I have to commend him for, okay. So let me say what I told Mid-City. is that you are creating a community that people can't come back to. Because Brookland Manor is a unique complex. It has a lot of 4, 5, and he lives in a 6-bedroom unit. And in the redevelopment plan, that would go away. There are no 5 and 6 bedroom units, and there are very few 4-bedroom units. And they were claiming to me that there's 1-to-1 replacement at Brookland Manor. And I said, that is not possible, because I am looking at the units that you have, and it is mostly 1 and 2 bedroom units. If you are a large family, you're saying to families, you're not welcome at Brookland Manor. And I think that is wrong. So that is specific.
What will you do?
Yes, what will I do?
Yes.
Well, I think we have to negotiate with these. First of all, we should not give 1 penny to developers who are not going to support keeping families in place. And I think we have to negotiate harder with developers. I'm not anti-developer, I'm just that developers have made a lot of money in our city for decades, and now it's time to give back. Now it's time, you've made a lot of profit off the people of the District of Columbia, and now it's time for you to create housing that we need, that our families need. Those 4, 5, and 6 bedroom units, no more studios in the high 500s with granite countertops and blah, blah, blah. Okay, my time is up, but I only got 1 ringing of the bell, so I hope I did pretty good here.
Councilmember Barnes, who heads the Housing Committee.
Yes, thank you very, very much. And Ms. Johnson, you know I'm very much aware of the issue. I also am aware of the realities of the situation. There are 3 things. One is that this is a matter of right. These are rental units. They are not ownership. And as a result, the owner of the property has the right to do the redevelopment. So that means that government can go some distance, but we don't have the authority to go the entire distance. And one of the things that was very glaring, as my colleague has stated, the issue of the reduction in the number of large units. Well, I met with a senior group. I think Ms. Barnes brought everybody down to see me, and I got a call, I think Thursday. She wants to come back, and she certainly can. I mentioned that, Anita, because I want people to know that this is ongoing and has been ongoing for some period of time. The Brookland Manor is one of those projects that will be redeveloped, and as a matter of right, it can be based on the size of the families. A family that once needed 6 bedrooms, it's probably now, as I was told, it's perhaps they need 2 or 3 bedrooms. And so that is, well, Ms. Wicks, that's the way they're looking at it these days. It may not be good. It may not be good, but that is how the development is seemingly proceeding. Now, the way the development is thriving today is because, whether you realize it or not, a number of the families that live on the property have what we call vouchers that are issued by the government with reduced rents. And that helps people, families, to stay in these large units. Do we in the city need large units? Most definitely. Do we want this to be redeveloped so that it will have large units? We need the large units. And I think that we can fight for it, but when we fight for it, we're going to put money into what they call project-based vouchers so that we will have and can retain the large units. But that's how we would do it. But as it is now, I just want you to know the owner has the right to do the redevelopment, and we, the government, cannot stop it unless we buy it. And it's acreage on top of acreage. We have the DOPA law, but the DOPA law doesn't have, most of our money is put in the process where we spend the $100 million on redevelopment, on redeveloping various projects and some new units. But I just want you to know that's the reality that we face in this city. And it's not just with Brooklyn Manor, it will be perhaps some other large projects as the projects across the city begin to age. And so just know that's how our money will have to be spent. I'm all for it. I would like for us to have $300 million allocated to the Housing Production Trust Fund. That would begin to make a real dent in the need if we're going to preserve affordable housing for people who want to continue to make this their home. And I think they should continue to make it their home. And I think the government needs to move in that direction. But when we talk about housing and how we spend housing, we're also talking about how we spend money on public safety. We're also talking about how we spend money on education. And so it's the dollars that you and I put into the coffers that make up the revenue, the resources that we have. And that's another reason why we probably have become so enamored with having sports as a mainstay so that we can bring in tax dollars. Everything that isn't tied down, we try to utilize to bring in more dollars because we don't raise any crops here. We do not manufacture anything. And every city has to have a tax base, and our tax base is us, the people, and the taxes that we pay. So housing is very, very integral to what we say we want, but we need to start putting more money where our mouth is. Thank you.
Thank you. I was ringing for you, not because I said you wanted to ring, right?
Yes.
Okay.
So, if I may, I'm not keenly aware of the resumes of the ladies that I'm sitting here with, but I want to answer the question the opposite way, if you don't mind. I want to start with what should be done. Because I can give you my experience to tell you what I've done in a second to show you that I know what should be done. A couple of things should happen. I had the privilege of working in Berry Farm. So when we're talking about displacing families, for the last 10 years of my life, I worked with 464 families that have now been reduced to less than 60 families living on a property that I wouldn't want rats to live on. And that's the truth.
That's right.
The reason why it hurts so much is because we have an opportunity to do something that will provide a vested stay for not just our elderly parents and family members, but also our young people. We talked about our young people. And what that is an option for those individuals to purchase. So we talk a lot about housing choice vouchers, or the old name for Section 8. By a show of hands, how many people in this room know about Section 3? Very few of you. Section 3 gives you the opportunity to do a couple of things if you're living in public housing. Go to school, college for free. The same voucher that you use each and every month to pay rent. And y'all know this is true. Look it up. If you live there for 2 years and your credit score is over 620, you can use that same voucher to purchase. Because I believe we have a responsibility to give individuals an opportunity to own. Because when you own, you can't tell me what to do when it's mine. So now I'm going to tell you where I live. So that's one opportunity that I think. We also need to spend more money investing in the HIPS program, which is a current program that we have on the books. Because again, every time I speak to a developer, a person on my team can ask you what I say. Thank you for the opportunity to talk to you. But how do we help people that's making about $45,000 be able to live here and stay? That's the question I ask. Because what my parents did for me and my sister is we live in Columbia Heights, in a neighborhood that collectively, and we've done pretty well for ourselves, collectively, we would not be able to afford there with the rate of the houses being purchased for today. It was because it was my mother and father did a rent-to-own option 50 years ago and gave Jackie and I an opportunity to live on Kenyon Street today. And I'm proud of that. I'm not ashamed of it, I'm proud of it. That option can be done with more people living in the District of Columbia that will give you and your grandchildren an opportunity to always come back. That's how I would fix the problem. Secondly, you asked about, have you done it? I did it. I did it in Berry Farm. All of those residents, you guys, were not displaced. Talk to them. They weren't displaced. Many of them wanted to leave. Many of them wanted to leave, and many of them were able to purchase homes. You know why they were able to purchase? Because work, and we don't like to talk about it, labor brings dignity. Many of them wanted opportunities to work, and they had to access skills and get opportunities to be gainfully employed, and they did. I know because I did it. I worked with them. We didn't case manage them, we coached them. And that's sometimes what people need. So that's who I am, and that's what I believe is important, and I know we can fix it that way. Thank you. And I'm pretty passionate about it, you guys.
Order then? Okay. So that would begin with Ms. Bond.
I'm happy to start. Thank you very much. And thank you all. It's all right. Okay. Thank you all so very much for coming. I think by seeing so many of you here, and I know that you have various candidates that you are supporting, it is a good day for the District of Columbia, because we are saying we care, we're ready, we're armed with information, and we're going to move forward. So this warms my heart. As a former chair of the Democratic Committee, I can tell you, wow, I hope this is happening everywhere across this great city. We need this to happen. Now, who am I? I'm Anita Bonds. I would be more than ecstatic to have your vote as one of your at-large council members when you go out and vote, either during early voting or if you're going to do like me and wait for November the 6th. I would greatly appreciate it. I would appreciate it because I enjoy doing the work on your behalf. And there's so much to be done. A lot of things are working well in the District of Columbia, but there are many things that we need to take care of. And I have worked diligently on your behalf, the behalf of the community, and want to continue to do that. I may not get it all right, but you know that you can call on me, and I am putting forth an effort to get it right for you. I love the community, grew up here, my mom is still here, and you know, I really want to make sure that all of us, yes, all of our family members are still here. That is correct. I mentioned her because she's 95, and I'm very proud of that. So that means I may be here a little longer than you realize. Okay, and through that effort, I've had the opportunity to see the comings and the goings. And so I think, therefore, I am of value to the city. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Tyler, what happened to our time?
We lost our time.
Oh, we lost our time. It's 1 minute.
I'm gonna respect you. I promise you. I'm the newcomer, you guys. I'm gonna make sure I stay within my 1 minute. I'm gonna ask for your vote up front. I'm Dion Reeder. I love this city. I love the people in this city. I'm blessed to be a third-generation Washingtonian, but I believe if you just decided to move here on yesterday and you love this city like I do, then you should actually be able to be a part of the city. So I want your vote on November the 6th. But I am going to say one thing about the crime because it's important to me as we close. I'm wearing this button that says survivor because my sister was murdered by her husband right on my porch in 1990. She was shot 4 times, 3 times in her back and once in her leg. And as she died, she yelled out my father's name. Why that's important for me, because the body of work that I've done in this city has been based on improving the lives of every resident in DC. We must collectively work together to impact the violent crime in this city. That's not an MPD issue, it's not a government issue, it is all of our issues. And collectively, we must do the work. Whether you elect me or not, I want to get elected, but whether you elect me or not, we have got to work collectively to change this city in a positive way so our young people can feel that this is their home. Thank you all. November the 6th, vote Dion Reed.
So thank you all so much for spending your Saturday with us. I want to especially thank Ms. Anita Shelton and the DC Women in Politics. I am Alyssa Silverman, and I'm asking for you to vote for me to return me to the Wilson Building this November 6th. There are differences in this race. Let me say that I go around the city doing meet and greets with residents all over the city, and certainly we've seen a ton of prosperity in this city, but in my opinion, it's a crime that child poverty is still going up in Ward 8. And that's an issue we need to address. Well, child poverty isn't going up in other wards.
Yes, it is.
It's not.
My grandson is black.
It is an issue that we need to address, that the prosperity in our city has been uneven. And I've spent time at the Wilson Building trying to address that issue.
You're giving her more time. Do you realize that this cannot be taken away? You may start again if you would
She
like.
said that's enough.
Thank
You
you.
said only
Thank
4
you.
people in
That's
Ward 8.
enough.
That's enough.
Well, I think that we need to be a city that is good for everyone. You spend your taxpayer dollars, and I don't think that we're getting the full benefit of the dollars that you work so hard to give us. We need to make sure that when we spend your money, it is for the right things. It has results, that we have schools that perform well across the city, that we have affordable housing that's in all parts of the city, not just in some parts of the city, and that we have services, when we replace your sidewalk, it doesn't crumble the next year. That you don't have potholes on your street that never get repaired. We have a $14 billion budget in our city, and I think that's a lot of money. And I think that we should be a city that not only that we should be proud of, but this nation can be proud of. We are the nation's capital, we're the capital of the world, and I think with a $14 billion budget, we can be the best city, not only in the country, but in the world. So thank you very much. I hope to get your vote on November 6th.